We've got a massive update in regards to the LGBT coin issue. NASCAR is looking to ban political sponsors here in 2022, and multiple crew chiefs have been announced for their respective teams. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off with a couple paint schemes that were revealed over the last couple of days. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Maya Snyder's 2022 Taxlayer scheme that we're going to see for the 2022 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. I really like this paint scheme a lot. Taxlayer seems to put out some really strong paint schemes for Maya Snyder, their other drivers. This one's no exception. I think it looks really good. The colors and all that look really strong. I think it's going to be looking really good, especially on Jordan Anderson Racing's car. Hopefully this car can go out there and win races in 2022 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think Jordan Anderson Racing has the potential to do that. I think it looks really solid, looks really good, and I'm looking forward to see this paint scheme out on the racetrack because I think it's going to look really good in 2022. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Kevin Harvick's 2022 Bushlight scheme that we're going to see. This is revealed in a store, and this is the Bushlight scheme that we're going to see throughout the 2022 year. This is definitely one of my favorite next-gen paint schemes that I've seen so far through 2022. It looks really good. One, I think the number's actually in a pretty good position. It's not all the way up to where it's basically warped. And secondly, they do a really good job of utilizing the sponsorship. But I've really liked the Bushlight paint schemes throughout my time as a fan, especially on the Kevin Harvick cars. And this one's no exception. I think did a really good job on this. And I'm looking forward to see this one out on the racetrack in 2022. And the final paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2022 Lido scheme that is going to be sponsoring Bubba Wallace at COTA and most likely 5 other races. They never gave the official number of races they're going to sponsor, but it's likely they're going to be sponsoring for 6 races, including at Circuit of the Americas. This paint scheme, in my opinion, actually looks really good. I think did a really good job of utilizing the sponsorship placement. I think 2311 has done a really solid job, especially when it comes to the reveals of their sponsorships. I think it looks really solid, and it's also cool to see that an old sponsor like Lidos is coming to sponsor Bubba Wallace because they've had a history of Bubba Wallace in the past as they sponsored Bubba Wallace I think in the Xfinity Series in 2016 and 2017. So it's really cool to see that Lidos is coming back to sponsor. Now, I've seen a lot of people question about DoorDash, why DoorDash has not been announced. DoorDash is most likely scaling back on some of their sponsorships, and they're not making probably as much money. And you have to remember that McDonald's is also stepping up to the plate to sponsor 2311 as well. So there have been a lot of questions in regards to that, and that's probably the reason why, because DoorDash isn't sponsoring as much, because you have multiple other sponsors that are coming in that want to sponsor Bubba Wallace in 2022. So that's really good to hear, and I'm really happy to see that there's at least some good news in regards to Bubba Wallace and there's his sponsorships for 2022. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Insurance King, as Insurance King is going to continue sponsoring Josh Bilicki in 2022. Now, while it's not officially finalized at this time, Josh Bilicki is expected to go to Spire Motorsports on a full-time basis in 2022. Well, it's not expected, but he is currently a favorite to go to Spire Motorsports in 2022. And Insurance King has been sponsoring Josh Bilicki, I think, for the last few seasons when he's driven for Ricker Racing and other organizations. And now they will continue sponsoring him in 2022, which is really good to see that you have a company that is willing to work with a driver like Josh Bilicki, because one thing that this overall is going to do is it's going to help him at least in the sponsorship game. So I'm very happy to see this for sure. I'm glad to see that Josh Bilicki will have a sponsor that is continuing to be committed with him. Really happy about it. I'm looking forward to see when hopefully we will get the word soon in regards to where he's ending up in 2022. But I think it's really exciting to see this, and I'm overall really glad to see that he will have a sponsor that is continuing and willing to work with him for the long run. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Atlanta tire test that is coming up this week. Now, as of right now, as we speak, there is an Atlanta tire test that's going on. What is going on is right now at the moment, basically they're testing package and stuff and tires to determine what kind of package they're going to run. Most likely they're going to run a super speedway package, but we don't know exactly what package they're going to run. They could run a higher horsepower package, but a lot of the people in the industry believe that they're going to run a lower horsepower package, a super speedway package that they're going to run for Cup, Xfinity, and trucks. Currently, right now, testing, you have the trucks in Xfinity Series that's testing today. Riley Herbst, Ty Gibbs, and Justin Allgaier. Riley Herbst for Ford, Ty Gibbs for Toyota, who's going to be in some point in Joe Gibbs Racing. I don't know why they've not announced it yet, but he's going to basically at this point it's been confirmed that he's going to be in that car. And Justin Allgaier for Chevy. For trucks, Grant Enfinger will be testing for Chevy, Tanner Gray will be testing for Ford, and John Hernimachek will be testing for Toyota. For the Cup Series, which will be testing tomorrow and Thursday, Ross Chastain will be testing for Chevy, Chris Buescher for Ford, and then Kurt Busch for Toyota. And that's all the people that will be testing for this tire test. Again, we don't know entirely what package they're going to run in 2022, which package they're going to run, but that is who will be testing for the Atlanta tire test is going on at the moment. There are also a lot of people in questioning about media and live streaming. They're not going to be live streaming this tire test just because of the fact that it is a tire test and Goodyear likes to test these cars very, very private. And they're really not letting media members in except for 1 hour to take photos and stuff. So I'm not sure if we'll talk more about this until they reveal the package for Atlanta Motor Speedway, but that is what's going on in regards to the Atlanta tire test that is going on as we speak right now. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the top 20 advertisers for 2021. It was reported yesterday by Adam Stern that Geico was the top advertiser on TV during 2021 NASCAR Cup races for iSpot TV estimates. Here are the top 20. First place was Geico. Second place was Toyota. Third was Ram Trucks. 4 was T-Mobile. 5 was USAA. 6 Busch Beer. 7th was Progressive. 8th was Verizon. 9th Ford. 10th was Coke Zero Sugar. 11th was Liberty Mutual. 12th was Goodyear. 13th was IBM Cloud. 14th was AmeriSave Mortgage. 15th was Wendy's. 16th was Subway. 17th was Carfax. 18th was Chevy. 19th was WeatherTech, and 20th was Amazon. There are definitely some major surprises, but first of all, Geico being number 1 is not surprising. They are a premier sponsor of NASCAR, so that's a big reason why they are probably going to be number 1. They advertised, I think, like there were so many different varieties of commercials that Geico had, so it's no surprise right there. I am surprised that the Liberty Mutual was not higher than it was. I thought Liberty Mutual would be a little bit higher considering we saw so many Liberty Mutual commercials throughout the year. So I'm a little surprised that Liberty Mutual was not higher than it was. I'm also a little bit surprised that Coke Zero Sugar was not a little bit higher because we all saw those I need to try your first commercials. By the way, I'm not a big fan of those commercials, but it does get the job done in some ways, but I'm still not a big fan of that commercial. But there are definitely some surprises here for sure, but that is the top 20 advertised sponsors for 2021, and we'll maybe they'll probably do more charting in regards to this for 2022, but that is it ones for 2021. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about JFabian. Now, JFabian had a court date scheduled for yesterday, basically for yesterday. It was reported by Bob Pockers, but it was postponed to February 7th. It's not rare for criminal cases to be continued, often to give attorneys time to work on the case. Now, to give an update and backstory on the JFabian situation, JFabian at this point, it's not, again, he's got right now a court dates going on, but right now what's going on in regards to JFabian is he's basically was the director for NASCAR Cup Series races and NASCAR races. He got caught for basically criminal charges in regards to not taking care of his pets. He had dogs and cats and he was not taking care of, and basically was arrested for that situation. He's on administrative leave from NASCAR. Now, I want to say one thing about JFabian without going into the other situation. I think JFabian was a terrible NASCAR Cup Series director, and I think he was really behind a lot of the issues and situations we had in 2021 with a lot of the officiating problems. So I'm not overall a big fan of JFabian in that sense, in that aspect. But at the same time, take care of your pets, take care of your animals, because you can get in trouble for animal cruelty charges, and just make sure you take care of your pets and animals. We'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. It's kind of frustrating we don't entirely know what the verdict's going to be, because he could go to jail for a very, very long time if he is found guilty, which honestly I think is going to end up guilty in this situation, because you got to take care of your pets and you got to take care of your animals. But that's the situation in regards to that, and we'll hopefully know more soon in regards to that. It's almost going to be next month before we find out maybe something, or maybe it'll get postponed long term down the road. But we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that situation. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Chili Bowl Nationals, as there is a new official record for the Chili Bowl Nationals in regards to entries. As of right now, there are 380 entries that will be competing in this year's Chili Bowl Nationals. There are 7 NASCAR Cup Series drivers that will be competing in the Chili Bowl Nationals. Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Ryan Newman, Ryan Newman, Alex Bowman, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Christopher Bell, and Chase Briscoe were the 7 drivers who competed full-time in the Cup Series last year who will be competing in the Chili Bowl Nationals. There are a lot of other notable drivers that are also going to be competing in that. We're going to talk about this on the channel most likely tomorrow, all the notable entries that will be competing. This is one of, I think, the most star-studded classes you've ever had for the Chili Bowl. You got former NASCAR Cup Series champions. You've got drivers that have won the Chili Bowl Nationals. You've got IndyCar drivers, IMSA drivers, all kind of drivers that are competing in this Chili Bowl, and it's going to be one of the first major races that's going to be starting to take place on my birthday, which is going to take place next week. You've got a lot of really, really awesome and a lot of really, really cool entries that are going to be competing in the Chili Bowl Nationals next year. I'm really, really excited for the Chili Bowl Nationals next week. I think it's going to be a fun event for sure, and I'm looking forward to talk about it here tomorrow on the channel in regards to those entries. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Clash TV schedule. Now, Bob Pockers reported this yesterday, and this is what the tentative Clash TV schedule is going to look like. So Saturday, February 5th, there's going to be a practice session that's going to be split into groups that's going to take place from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern. And then there will be a single lap qualifying to determine basically what the heat races are going to look like, where the starting lap will be for the heat races and all 4 of the heats that will take place at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Then on Sunday, February 6th, which is when the season 10th is going to start, we will have the heats at 3 p.m. Eastern, which will be, I think, 12 p.m. California time, Los Angeles time. And then the main event is going to take place at 6 p.m. Eastern. 23 drivers will be locked into the event. The only driver that is currently at the moment locked into the main event is Kyle Larson. Everyone else at the moment is still looking to have to qualify for that event, which I think you're going to see a pretty surprising number of drivers that you never thought would probably make the event that are going to make the event. This is really, really cool. I like the TV schedule. Again, things could change. I wish the race though was at night. I wish the main event was at night, but at the same time, I understand maybe some audience issues, maybe with like sound and all that stuff, similar to what's going on in Nashville. Could be a major, major problem, and could be a major reason why this is an issue and causing problems. But at the same time, I wish that the Clash TV schedule, I wish the Clash was at night. I know they originally had the event going for nighttime, but it is what it is, and that is the Clash TV schedule that looks like what will be here next month. Now let's take a look at the Daytona TV schedule, because that actually also got revealed as well. So on Tuesday the 15th, we'll have Cup practice at 5:05 p.m. Eastern and 6:35 p.m. Eastern. Then Wednesday, Cup qualifying will take place at 8:05 p.m. Eastern, so 75 Central Time from where I live. I think 5:05 Eastern for the West Coast. Then on Thursday, there will be a lot of things and activities happening. Truck Series practice will take place at 4:35 p.m. Eastern. Then ARCA practice will take place at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. And then the Cup duels will take place at 7 Eastern. Then on Friday, I believe it's the 18th. ARCA qualifying will take place at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Then truck qualifying will take place at 3 p.m. Eastern. Then Xfinity Series practice will take place at 4:35 p.m. Eastern. Then another Cup practice session will take place at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then the truck race will officially take place at 7:30 Eastern, pending weather. Then on Saturday the 19th, we'll have Cup practice at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Then Xfinity Series qualifying will take place at 11:35 a.m. Eastern. Then the ARCA race will take place at 1:30 Eastern. And then Xfinity race will be at 5 Eastern. And then on Sunday, we'll have the Daytona 500 at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. One thing I really, really like is they're having a lot of practice. I think there's going to be almost 4 hours of practice for Cup Series. At least at 500, that's really, really good. And it's going to get these teams acclimated with each other. I think that's really, really cool. And I do actually like a lot of the sessions that they're having. I do wish that Xfinity and Trucks will get a little more practice, but at the same time, their young guys will learn stuff very, very quickly. I like TV schedule a lot. I think it looks really, really cool, and that is the Daytona schedule. Again, things can absolutely change. We may see less practice for 2022 Daytona, but we also could see more practice show up for 2022, so we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that, but that is a Daytona schedule for 2022 that's going to be happening here next month. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Venturini Motorsports. As Venturini Motorsports has announced 2 drivers for the 20 Venturini car for 2022. Jesse Love, who won, the ARCA West Championship, I think, in 2020, and Corey Heim, who finished runner-up in the ARCA Championship, will be splitting the 20 car in ARCA in 2022. Jesse Love will drive the majority of the car for 14 races, while Corey Heim will drive the number 20 for 6 races in 2022. These two, I think, are really, really talented drivers. We know that Jesse Love, I think, again, I don't think he's of age yet. I don't think he's 18 at the moment, so right now he can't, unfortunately, compete full-time in the Truck Series yet. That's why he's not going over to Trucks next year, and why he's still racing for the majority here in ARCA, though there is still a possibility he could race in Trucks next year with an organization. But I think Jesse Love is going to do really, really well with the Venturini team next year. Corey Heim, I think he's got a shot to win all 6 races in those cars, excuse me. He's going to be racing, I think, 15 races with KBM in 2022, and I think that having a few of those ARCA races are going to help him develop himself going into next year. So I'm very excited to see what he can do in 2022 with the Venturini group. I think he's going to do really, really well. I think both drivers have a really strong shot of competing for the overall victories in those events. Of course, you're going to have to go up against guys like Sammy Smith, who Sammy Smith most likely will be in the 18 car full-time in ARCA in 2022. So I'm really excited to see what happens in regards to that. And good luck to Jesse Love and Corey Heim in 2022. Now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Amber Belken. As Amber Belken will be drive full-time in our main ARCA competition in 2022, driving in the 30 car for Retta Jones Racing. For a lot of people who don't know Amber Belken is, Amber Belken is a very, very talented racer who I think is going to be very, very surprising to watch in 2022. She's someone who has really, really worked hard, has come up from basically the grassroots type of racing, and she has won a lot of races in the grassroots type of level. So I think she's going to be really, really fun to watch with the Retta Jones Racing Group in 2022. Now, she is going to have some very tough competition next year because, like I said, you're going to have Corey Heim and Jesse Love, who are going to be splitting a ride next year. You're going to have Sammy Smith, who's most likely running full-time at ARCA. You've also got other drivers, like you could probably be in the Venturini group, and other teams that are going to be showing up. I know that GMS is showing up with Daniel Dye next year, and I think he's going to be a really, really big threat in 2022 as well. But I think she can handle herself very, very well. And I think that Amber Belken will compete for some top 5s in ARCA next year and maybe be an underdog to win races in ARCA next year. I know I'm putting my expectations really, really high on her, but I think that she's capable enough to go out there and get that done. I think that she's going to do really, really well in 2022. I think she's going to have a lot of fun as well. I think the fact that she is going full-time is really, really exciting. I'm happy for her. I did not expect her to get into this ride, by the way, so I'm overall very, very happy for her that she is getting an opportunity to race full-time in ARCA in 2022. I think she's going to do really, really well, and I think she's an underdog to win the main ARCA championship in 2022, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Austin Herzog. As Austin Herzog is going to be driving a 16 for Bill McAnally Racing in the ARCA West Series in 2022 in the 16 Chevy. Didn't expect to be saying a Chevy. But Austin Herzog, I don't really know much about him. He's going to be a rookie in 2022. But his expectations in ARCA West are going to be very, very high. Because the Bill McAnally Racing Organization is one of the top dog organizations in ARCA, and you're expected to go out there and win championships. Guys, a lot of drivers have come from that team. Look at Todd Gillen, who's full-time in the Cup Series now. Derek Cross is driving for their organization in the Truck Series in McAnally Hilgeman Racing. Haley Deegan's come from that organization in the past. And you've got other drivers like Jesse Love who's come from that organization. So you're going to have a lot of expectations going into next year. And while I don't think your expectations are going to be winning a championship, you're expected to be competing for a championship. And they're a team that's going to want to go out there and win ARCA championships. So the expectations for this team are going to be very, very high going into 2022, and they're going to be expected to hit at a very, very high level going into 2022. So I really hope he does really, really well next year, because if he does really, really well, I think it's going to be a really good year for this team, and good luck to him in 2022, because he's going to need it, because there's a lot of competition in ARCA West next year, though that series has kind of dwindled in their popularity and people in the series, but I think he'll have a really good shot of competing really, really well next year. And good luck to him in 2022, because I think he's absolutely going to need it, because there's a lot of competition. And good luck to him in 2022, because I think he's got a good shot of doing very well next year. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Emerling-Gase Motorsports. As was announced on, I think, the 30 for 31st, that Joey Gase Racing and Patrick Emerling have teamed up to form Emerling-Gase Motorsports. They will have 2 cars in 2022. They'll have a 35 car will be full-time, and the second car will be part-time. 3 drivers have been confirmed. Patrick Emerling, Joey Gase, and Shane Lee will drive with more drivers to be announced here in the near future. They never gave hints or names of who else could be driving them, but those are the 3 drivers that will be driving at least so far for 2022. I'm really intrigued to see how this team is going to do because honestly, they apparently have ran in the past. I think they ran in 2021, and we all thought that they were going to be a one-car. They were going to be a one-car team, and it was just going to be Joey Gase Racing with JGR. But now you have Patrick Emerling, a driver who's competing in the Wheel and Modified Tour, and who had some pretty decent success in the Wheel and Modified Tour, who's going to be competing with this team. Overall, their expectations aren't going to be as high just because we really don't know what they're going to do next year. But I think you've got three pretty solid drivers who are going to be driving for him. I think Joey Gase is a decent driver overall. I know I've given him a lot of crap in the past, but I think he's a decent enough driver who could have a good year with this team. And Shane Lee, he's not raced, I think, since 2019 after the whole H2 Motorsports situation. We really know how that situation fell when their owner basically became corrupt and went to prison, and who had multiple prison sentences, I believe, in the past. But it's definitely interesting if this move overall is happening. I think it's a good move overall, and good luck to this team next year because they're going to need it because there's a lot of competition in Xfinity, and there's a lot of entries that are going to be showing up next year in Xfinity. There's talk right now that potentially 50 cars could show up in the Xfinity Series in 2022, just in the Xfinity Series season opener, just because there's a lot of competition in Xfinity. So I'm really looking forward to see what happens in 2022. Good luck to the team, and hopefully they can do really, really well in 2022. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about iRacing. As iRacing has acquired Monster Games, which is a company that made NASCAR Heat and the SRX games. This, in my opinion, is a massive, massive overall move for iRacing to acquire Monster Games. Like I just mentioned a second ago, Monster Games is a company that made the original NASCAR Heat series, and they came back. They made NASCAR. I think they made NASCAR Heat Evolution, NASCAR Heat 2, NASCAR Heat 3, and NASCAR Heat 4 before officially losing a license to Motorsports Games in 2020, where Motorsports Games is currently developing the game. And also, they were the company that made the SRX games. I think the SRX games are actually really, really good. This is huge because you're going to have a company like iRacing coming in, a company that knows how to develop really, really strong games. You look at iRacing, a simulator. And while I don't expect that it's going to be especially perfect, the company is when it comes to their console games, I think it is going to be a really, really strong company next year, and I think that we're going to potentially see some good games. Again, I don't know when we'll get the first game from this company. We'll see first game from iRacing when they do come and develop, but I think this is a massive and a really, really big move for iRacing to come in. And I just wish, unfortunately, we didn't have the Motorsports games. I just wish we would have stayed with Monster Games at least for another year or two, because right now we'd probably be in a better position with iRacing develop. And I know a lot of people would like basically Motorsports Games to lose a license and send it over to NASCAR basically to go exclusively with iRacing, which they've kind of had an exclusivity right with iRacing anyways. Unfortunately, though, Motorsports Games and NASCAR are in the middle of a contract that right now goes through 2029. And NASCAR, of course, they could break that seal, they could break that contract, but I don't think NASCAR is going to break that contract. So we're unfortunately stuck with Motorsports Games, as it's had some shady stuff happen in the past. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards, and maybe long-term we can go back to iRacing. But regardless, the fact that iRacing is coming in and developing it, I think is really, really awesome. I'm looking forward to it for sure, and hopefully they develop some really strong games, and we could see some of the best games come out, and we could probably not have issues with loading and stuff, and better frame and not major frame drops and stuff. So I'm happy to see that iRacing is coming in and that they're going to be developing. I think this is really, really awesome. I think it's really, really cool, and I'm happy overall to see that iRacing is coming in and they are going to be developing the next future Motorsports games long term down the road. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NY Racing. As NY Racing on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day continues to tease that they're looking to potentially come back for 2022 to NASCAR. Now, I've discussed about this team many, many times on the channel, and there have been speculation in 2021 that they were going to show up, and then they decided that they were not going to show up till the next-gen car arrived. And there's a lot of questions about NY Racing just because of the fact that this team is very, very shady, because Jonathan Cohen is a very, very shady individual. However, there is a possibility that NY Racing could, after all, show up in 2022. According to multiple reports, apparently NY Racing does have a next-gen chassis. So they apparently have a next-gen chassis, which is really, really interesting, because I didn't think that they would have a next-gen chassis. So there is a very strong possibility that NY Racing could show up at least for a few races in 2022. It's unclear though if they're going to show up, because again, because this team has been kind of quiet. It's very similar to the money team, that you don't really know if they're ever going to show up. But at the same time, they could show up in 2022. The biggest question right now is if they are to show up in 2022, which I'm not saying they're going to. I'm just saying that there's a possibility they could show up. What driver would drive for them in 2022? There are a few candidates who could drive for them. First, of course, J.J. Yeley. J.J. Yeley has driven for this team in the past. He drove for them, I think, in 2018 when they were the 7 car. When I think they had like Steakhouse Elite that was basically sponsoring them in 2018. They ran, I think, the Coke 600 and a couple other races before never showing up again. And they didn't have a really strong performance in 2018. It's been a few years since they have raced. They were also known as Extreme Racing back in 2013 and 2014. So they've had a Cup Series experience in the past. So J.J. Yeley does have experience with this team. Johnny Sauter maybe, but Johnny Sauter, I'm not sure if he's even going to show up next year in 2022 to race. I mean, there's talk maybe he's going to retire, and there's talk he's going to be part-time with ThorSport Racing in 2022. So maybe Johnny Sauter comes to the team, but I'm not sure if he's going to be the driver. Ryan Newman is the other driver that could be in it. Apparently, they do follow Ryan Newman on Instagram, so Ryan Newman could be a possibility, and I think he's actually a lead candidate to go to this ride if they show up in 2022. I think Ryan Newman would have to be a lead candidate for a potential opportunity to get into this ride in 2022. So I'm not entirely sure if NY Racing is going to show up in 2022. If they do, I think it's really, really awesome. To be honest, I'm really, really skeptical of them showing up just because of the fact that they've had a shady backstory and their company is very, very shady. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to that if they do officially show up in 2022. But to be perfectly honest, I'm very, very skeptical that they're showing up. And I think a lot of people should be skeptical of them showing up as well. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Toyota in IndyCar. It was reported by, I think, on New Year's Eve or a day before New Year's Eve by Adam Stern that Roger Penske said at PRA show this month, or earlier in the month, that IndyCar has a potential new OEM in the late stages per Nathan Brown, and this comes amid heavy industry rumors about Toyota. Now, Toyota said in November that, of course, we've had discussions when asked about IndyCar talks. Now, to give a backstory, I think we talked about this on the channel. I think about a month ago that there have been a conversation talks about a new OEM coming into IndyCar. We've been following this basically for the last couple of years. There's been talks about an OEM coming into IndyCar. For a while there, we thought Ferrari was going to come in and become a third OEM, but then they moved a lot of their stuff to Haas, and basically because of the Formula One regulations, the FIA regulations that are coming this year with the change of regulations, with basically less people being needed in 2022 for Formula One, they're basically changed up the regulations of that, and a lot of those people got moved over to Haas, and there's talk that maybe they'll be coming to WEC, and they're also even talking maybe they're going to come to IndyCar, but they wanted their own manufacturer, they wanted to have their own non-spec, they didn't want to be spec, which is one of the reasons, and a change in ownership over there basically changed the game in regards to that. Toyota does actually seem pretty likely. You know, Toyota is basically a manufacturer that is invested in many sports right now. They're invested in World Endurance Championship, and possibly they may get invested with LMDH. They're invested in NASCAR. They've won NASCAR Cup Series championships. I think they may be invested in Formula E, but I don't remember. But they're invested in multiple different series right now, so it's not a major surprise to me if they do come over to IndyCar. And again, they actually have raced in IndyCar in the past, I think in late 90s and early 2000s, they were in IndyCar. So they do have a past relationship. Now, do I think that it will happen? It's very, very possible. And I think there's a really strong chance that it will happen. There's other companies that could come in, but IndyCar's been talking about a third manufacturer. And I think a lot of this is due to the rise of IndyCar. IndyCar, the last year or two, has had a major rise in regards and prominence in regards to new, basically, viewership. I think they had their highest viewership in over 25 years. And their Indy 500 was the most watched Indy 500 in years as well. So I'm really excited to see if Toyota does show up in IndyCar and what team would go over there. I would think, of course, Andretti Autosport would have to be one of the favorites to go over there if they do come over to IndyCar, just because of the fact that Andretti is not loyal to one manufacturer. They were with Chevy, and then they came back to Honda, and it's possible they could go to a new manufacturer that comes in as well. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to the story, because this story is definitely developing right now, and hopefully we'll hear more about Toyota IndyCar, but it's very possible that Toyota may be coming back to IndyCar here in the near future. So hopefully that happens soon, and hopefully we hear more in regards to that very, very soon. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jacques Villeneuve. As Jacques Villeneuve is scheduled to test for Team Herzog next week at the Daytona Next Gen Test. The team's Daytona 500 plans 2022 schedule, Luis Haseman's to do road courses, is still at this point to be announced. Now, Team Herzog was only at the point, at the time of this, before basically this was revealed, they were only expected a time to do road courses and short tracks. However, there have been talk maybe they were also going to do Daytona 500 as well. The fact that they are going to be at this next gen test is very, I think it basically confirms that they're going to be at the Daytona 500 next year. Now, one thing that's really, really cool is Jacques Villeneuve. Jacques Villeneuve has not been in NASCAR, I think, in many, many years. I think the last time he was in NASCAR, I think it was 2012 and 2013 when he drove for Team Penske in their number 22 car. So it's been a while since he's raced. And the question is, I know a lot of people ask, would he basically be granted approval because he's not raced on an oval in many, many years? Well, I think it would be approved because he's an IndyCar champion and he's an F1 world champion. So he's probably going to be able to be granted to run in the Daytona 500 as well. Now, of course, Jacques Villeneuve, like I said, has not raced in many, many years, at least in the main NASCAR world, except he has, of course, raced in the NASCAR Euro Series. So he has been racing over there in the Euro Series, which they do have some ovals, but they also do have a lot of road courses as well over in Europe. So it's definitely a really, really interesting as Jacques Villeneuve is going to be back racing. And again, I'm really happy to see that Jacques Villeneuve is coming back. And I think the next gen car is overall creating intrigue as well. And it's also cool to see that Team Herzog will potentially become the 39th team to show up for the Daytona 500. There have been a lot of concerns in regards to how many entries are going to show up for the Daytona. As of right now, there's only 38 confirmed, but with the fact that Team Herzog is going to be testing for Daytona tells me that there are at least going to be 39. I think we're going to see a full field for Daytona 500. I think we're going to see 40 to 41 cars show up, maybe some field of qualifiers. I think we're going to get 40, but I'm not sure if we're going to get more than that. So we'll have to wait and see in regards to that, but I'm really happy to see that Jacques Villeneuve is coming back. It has been a few years. I'm worried maybe he'll cause a wreck because, again, he's not been in a car in many, many years, but I think he'll be good enough to do this, and I'm glad to see that he's going to be testing the next-gen car. And Team Herzog, a lot of people wonder if they were ever going to get a charter, why they're not running full-time. They don't have the money to fund that, and, of course, Rayum is involved with this team as well, so that'll be really interesting for sure that Jacques Villeneuve is going to be, this year, going to be going to test at Daytona here next week, because, again, you have that big next-gen test that's coming up on the 11th to 12th next week at Daytona. So it's really, really exciting, and I'm glad to see that Jacques Villeneuve is back in the spotlight, and he will be testing the next-gen car. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Junior Motorsports crew chief lineup that was officially announced today. So, Sam Mayer is officially confirmed to the 1 car, and Taylor Moyer, who was a crew chief for the 8 car the last couple years, will be crew chiefing for Sam Mayer, who was working with Sam Mayer last year. Justin Allgaier, who will be driving once again the 7, will be working with Jason Burdett, who's been working with Justin Allgaier since 2016, so it's no surprise that they're working together. Josh Berry will be in the 8 car, and he'll be working with Mike Bumgarner, who he kind of worked with when he was in the 1 car, and also working with Michael Annett over there for a couple years. And Noah Grayson, who will be in the 9 once again, will have crew chief who was at Roush RFK Racing last year, Luke Lambert, will be crew chiefing for Noah Grayson in 2022. Luke Lambert, like I said, he's crew chief for many, many drivers. He crew chief for Ryan Newman for a couple years, and he also crew chief for Chris Buescher for a couple years as well at RFK Racing. And now he's going to be jumping back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series to work with Noah Gragson. I think that Luke Lambert actually is a very, very solid crew chief. I think he's a guy who knows how to get it done, and I think he's going to be someone that is going to have a very successful time working with Noah Gragson next year, and I think he could really, really help Noah Gragson. Plus, he's a really, really strong strategist. I think he's going to do a really, really good job in regards to creating a lot of really strong strategy for Noah Gragson next year. And hopefully Noah Gragson won't have as many DNFs he had at the beginning of the year. But the fact they have practice qualifying is also going to help the next year. I think it's going to help that pairing gel going into 2022. So I'm really happy about this crew chief lineup. And the fact that you're going to have Taylor Moore working with Sam Mayer, they're still going to be able to work together, help each other out. And I think overall the Junior Motorsports crew chief lineup itself, I think is a really good combination, and you have a lot of good parents that are going to be working together next year. So I'm very excited about this crew chief pairing, these crew chief lineups, and I think Junior Motorsports is a team that's going to be really, really strong next year. I still think Kaulig is the best team going into next year, so you have 3 really, really good veterans. But I think Junior Motorsports is right behind him, and I think the acquisition of Luke Lambert coming over to Junior Motorsports to work with this team next year, I think is really, really awesome. Really, really great as a whole. And again, I really like this Junior Motorsports crew chief lineup. I think it's really, really good, and I'm excited to see what this crew chief pairings and these crew chief lineups can do for 2022. I'm looking forward to that for sure. Now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Drew Blickenzerfer. As Drew Blickenzerfer will crew chief for Erik Amarola in 2022. Drew Bugazerfer about a couple weeks ago was announced he would no longer be crew chief for Michael McDowell, and there have been a lot of wonders in regards to where Drew Bugazerfer was going to be going in 2022. Well, he's moving into Stewart-Haas Racing in 2022. A lot of people are asking about Mike Bugarewicz. Well, Mike Bugarewicz will be moving into an SHR performance director role for simulation, enhancement, and all that stuff in regards to simulation. He'll be moving into a director role at Stewart-Haas Racing. When I look at this move, I'm definitely really shocked that Drew Blinkenserver is coming back. But there actually is a little more merit to this than meets the eye. Drew Blinkenserver actually in the past has crew chief for Erik Amarola. He crew chiefed the final 6 races for Erik Amarola in 2016. And then he crew chiefed the whole 2017 season for that 43 car and also crew chief in 2018 for Bubba Wallace, for I think leaving in 2019 to go and work with Michael McDowell. Drew Bugazerfer has been in the industry for a very long time. He crew chief for Carl Lewis in the Xfinity Series. I think in 2000, I think he may have crew chief from 2007 when Carl won the Xfinity Series. No, that was Brad Parrott, I think. Never mind. But he crew chief, of course, for Carl Lewis in 2009 and 2010, I believe. And then he crew chiefed for David Reagan in 2011. And then he continued working with Roush, I think, through 2012 or 2013. Then he went to work over Richard Petty Motorsports and was with the Frank Front Row and other organizations back in the day. Drew Bugazerfer, I think, is a crew chief that is overall improved. And I think the fact that he's going back to work with Erik Amarola, I think having a crew chief that he's worked with in the past and where Erik Amarola was pretty decent in 2017, I think that we're going to see Drew really help Erik Amarola have a much better season. Like, I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire with Erik Amarola, but I mean, he just won the Daytona 500 in 2021. And I think having Drew over there to work with Erik Amarola in 2022 is only not just, it's really, in my opinion, going to help Erik Amarola next year. Because Erik Amarola, despite winning a race in 2021 in New Hampshire, Erik Amarola absolutely struggled. Finished, I think, 20th in the points. Had, like, I think only 1 or 2 top 10s through, like, the first 20 races of the year. He just was not very good in 2021. He did improve in the second half of the year. But at the beginning of the year, he absolutely struggled. And having Drew, a guy that's done this for a long time, come in and work with Erik Amarola, having a veteran presence there, is only going to help Erik Amarola going into 2022. So I'm very happy to see that Drew Blinkenserver is going to basically come out and work Erik Amarola next year. And I think that this will help SHR's group. A lot of people are also asking in regards to what's going on with the crew chief lineup for SHR. All the other crew chiefs, that being Mike Shiplett, Ronnie Childers, and Johnny Klossmeyer, will remain as crew chiefs in 2022 in their respective places. Mike Shiplett for Cole Custer, Ronnie Childers for Kevin Harvick, and Johnny Klossmeyer for Chase Briscoe in 2022. So I'm really happy to see Drew's coming over, and Mike's going to be moving into a director role, which I think could have major implications of helping SHR improvement in regards to things next year. So I'm happy to see Drew Blinkenserver is coming in to SHR in 2022. SHR has been making some major moves over the last couple of years, and the fact that they picked up a veteran crew chief who's been in the industry for a very long time, I think is really awesome. Really cool. And I'm happy to see that Drew Blinkenserver is coming to work with Stewart-Haas Racing 2022. I think this is a major pickup for the team. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories of today's episode, as we're going to talk about political sponsors. As it was revealed, as according to Adam Stern, NASCAR has started looking at banning political sponsors in 2020, but it now appears that there is movement toward implementing it for 2022. Ban would only apply to things at track-like paint schemes and wouldn't prevent an away-from-track political endorsement by a driver. Now, to give a backstory on this situation, we'll talk about the major situation, why this is being brought up. We'll talk about the LGBT situation here in just a little bit. But NASCAR, there was a lot of political movements that were happening in 2020. You had the Black Lives Matter car that Bubba Wallace ran. You had multiple Trump schemes, and Back the Blue schemes were run by Mike Harmon Racing. I think Austin Wayself also ran a Back the Blue scheme in 2020. And there were a lot of political sponsorships. And also, Corey LaJoie had the Trump car in 2020 as well. And there have been a lot of talk about potentially implementing this in 2020. They actually were talking, I remember this too, I talked about this on the channel a couple years ago, that they were talking about banning political sponsors, and now they're looking to potentially do that in 2022. For me, in my personal opinion, and this is for both sides of the spectrum, whether you're on the left or the right, they're looking to ban this. To me, I think this 100% is a really good move in my opinion. I know some people disagree with me, and I'm probably getting a lot of hate for saying this. I think getting rid of political sponsors in general is a really good move. For me, I used to be involved in politics a lot more, but the fact they're looking to overall ban political sponsors, I know freedom of speech is a thing, and I 100% agree with freedom of speech. But at the same time, if they're just going to go ahead and ban political spots as a whole, I'm definitely fine with that because honestly, I'm just tired of politics. Politics have become so toxic, especially over the last decade with both sides. It doesn't matter what side you're on, whether you're on the left or the right. There has been a lot of toxicity. And I think we come over to racing just to escape the real world and political side of stuff. And I think the fact that they're looking to ban political sponsors, I think it's a thumbs up. I'm just tired of it. You know what I mean? Everything gets politicalized. And I just think at this point, let's go ahead and just in general get rid of political sponsors. I think it'll be better for the sport as a whole if they do this. I think it'll be a much better world. And again, I know people say, well, if they're going to ban political sponsors, let's ban the start of the race, all the pre-race implications, which we can't do that. But what I mean is like sponsors and stuff. Again, there's so many political, again, there could be an issue with gray area and stuff when it comes to sponsors. That's one thing that could end up becoming a major issue in regards to that and a gray area because sometimes things end up a little more political than they are. But I think the fact that they're overall looking to ban political sponsors as a whole, I think is a thumbs up in the right direction. If this is the way that they're going to be going for 2022, I think that this is a thumbs up to me. I think banning political sponsors is a much better direction than not. I think that because it's going to cause a lot of controversy. I think this shows that NASCAR is, at least in some aspect, they're trying to get out of the political game. They're trying to stay out of politics, and they're just trying to focus on racing. Because I think politics are not as important as focusing on racing. We come to racing to watch motorsports and escape the lives of politics. So I'm a thumbs up if political sponsors are going to be banned. I think it's a step in the right direction, and I think it'll be a good move if NASCAR overall does just go ahead and ban political sponsors as a whole. So we'll have to wait and see what happens if NASCAR does officially announce this, and this is potentially going to happen this year. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about a major update in regards to Brandon Brown and LGB Coin. For those of you who have been following the story in regards to Brandon Brown and the LGB Coin situation, it was revealed on, I think, Thursday the 30th that Brandon Brown, well, I think it was the 30th, that Brandon Brown had basically signed a full season sponsor with LGBcoin.io, which is basically a meme coin, which in itself is very, very shady. But they had signed a full season sponsor for 2022 at the time they had basically announced it. Well, a few hours later, about 6 hours later, as a matter of fact, NASCAR told multiple reporters, including Jim Utter and Bob Poggers, that the sponsor had not been approved and that they had gotten an email in regards to that. Colin Fern, who works at Brandon Brown Motorsports, Brandon Bill Motorsports, I can't keep forgetting what team it is, but who works at Brandon Bill Motorsports, he says that it actually was approved, and basically that because it was not legible, they said that, and basically said they had it approved at the time. Well, there has been a major update in regards to this, and a lot of updates in regards to this. The first report was Brandon Brown told SBJ last week he'd been getting advice from NASCAR on handling the LGB situation, which NASCAR acknowledges. But there appears to have been a communication breakdown on whether LGB paint schemes would be allowed and if NASCAR had given final approval. Brandon Brown last week on consulting with NASCAR at the LGB situation is another statement that was brought up. NASCAR and I are kind of in the same boat about what to do here, but I don't think anyone has the right answer. The unfortunate part is that it's my name and my career that are at stake and the risk is high. Then there was another report that came out of Adam Stern that says an LGB Coin rep tells USA Today that NASCAR originally approved the deal under stipulation that only the LGB acronym would be used, while an external PR strategist hired by Brandon Bill says NASCAR had provided written approval for the sponsorship deal. Then there was a statement that did come out here on Sunday, on I think it was the 2nd of January, so a couple days ago, they did release a statement. Brandon Bill released a statement in regards, and he said, "We are very aware and appreciative of the process required to approve sponsors and paint schemes and would not attempt to circumvent the process. Brandon Bill Motorsports submitted our most recent sponsors and paint schemes to NASCAR following the standard approval process that we have undertaken many times before without issue. We received written approval on the sponsors from a NASCAR racing operations official on December 26, 2021 through an email. The team subsequently moved forward with an announcement only after being provided with this approval. The sponsor approval was unambiguous. The first 4 words of the email from NASCAR states, the sponsors are approved. The only feedback offered was related to minor graphic design changes to ensure legibility on the track at 170 miles an hour. We will continue to work with NASCAR and look forward to resolving this matter and clearing the error as soon as possible." There are a couple things I want to talk about in regards to this statement, because every day we hear more about this, the more fishy this situation seems to be. First of all, in regards, I want to talk about the statement and go into the Brandon Bill situation. I personally think that if you have the emails, we should be able to see them. Unless there's legal issues where you can't see them, I think if you do really have the emails, prove that you have the emails. I know that multiple people on the team have said they've gotten a written approval email in regards to that, but if you have the emails, go ahead and show and prove that, because I think everyone really wants to see the emails, because there's a lot of questions in regards, are these emails true or not? Or if these emails are true, why did NASCAR go ahead and prove it and then 6 hours earlier back out? Well, I think that there is a little more to this story. I actually do believe that Venturini Motorsports actually did get this approved by NASCAR. I think NASCAR did originally approve this, and we're going to let this team approve for the sponsorship. What I think happened is there was so much backlash against Brandon Brown in that sponsorship. And there was, I think, an account Patriot Takes that had, I think, like 300,000 followers. That post got so much backlash from so many people on Twitter. And I think sponsors in the industry, in the Xfinity and working the Xfinity series, including the main sponsor, Xfinity, who is a premier sponsor of NASCAR, by the way, I think went to NASCAR and said that they were talking maybe about pulling out and leaving the sport. And they were basically threatening NASCAR, I think, to leave the sport. And they had sponsors that were really, really scared and really, really cautious of the acronym. Because at the time, NASCAR said, I think in November, at their the big show thing, they talk about the big state of address thing that they do for the sport. CFL said they really did not want to associate with that. That's why Matt Benedetto, really at the time, has not been able to find a ride and basically almost got threatened to lose his deal in the Cup Series. And NASCAR said they were trying to disassociate themselves with that. But at the same time, Brandon Brown is not really wanting to make this a political situation anymore, and then basically he was looking for this. I'm looking at this from a perspective. I understand what NASCAR is trying to do here. They're trying to keep their image clean, and they're trying to get out of the political landscape. But at the same time, in my opinion, if Brandon Motorsports is trying to make it their own thing, and they're not trying to make it political, just let them run the scheme, in my opinion. Just let them go with the approval process, because at this point, if they don't approve this, because this has already turned into a media firestorm and a shit show that really did not need to basically happen. NASCAR should have just been like, hey, we're going to let you go ahead and run the scheme. We're going to let it go because, again, the fact that they are not approving it, this is turning into a bigger media storm than needed to be. You've got both sides of the political spectrum that have gone after NASCAR, and NASCAR is supposed to have a big year with the next gen car coming in, and, of course, the LA Clash, that's about to happen in a month. And this story is not going to stop anytime soon. And to me, in my opinion, I just believe that NASCAR just go ahead and let them run the paint scheme and not hold up the situation, because to me, if they continue to cause problems, if this continues to go on for a long time and NASCAR doesn't approve, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to be mad. Not just NASCAR fans, but you're going to have fans have issues. Because in my opinion, this situation could have been avoided. And let me bring that up. We wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. We wouldn't even be talking about the situation right now if we just wouldn't do front stretch interviews. To me, I think that there's no brainer here. We no longer need to do front stretch interviews on the front stretch. I've been saying this for a while, and I've been complaining about this on Twitter. I've been complaining about this for a very, very long time, and a lot of people have been complaining about this for about a year or two now, that we need to stop doing front stretch interviews. Number one, they're kind of cringy. I'm not a fan of them, and visually interviews, we used to do this for a long time. I don't know what changed in 2018 and why NBC and Fox said, oh, it's okay, let's just do front stretch interviews. I don't know what changed in their mind and mentality, but we need to stop doing front stretch interviews, because this whole situation could have been fixed in the first place if we didn't do the front stretch interviews. And I really feel for Brandon Brown in this situation. I think that they unfortunately got screwed out of this deal, because Brandon Brown had nothing to do with this situation, and people blame Kelly Stavitz for it, and to be fair, she kind of did cover it up. But at the same time, what is she supposed to say? The people in her ear are probably telling her, say something and basically cover the situation up and ignore the situation, or could ignore the situation, could have ignored it. But at the same time, she probably had tried to cover up. She really didn't have a choice. But at the same time, I really feel for Brandon Brown in this situation, because he had sponsors that aren't talking to him, and he got put into a really, really bad situation here. So, in my opinion, NASCAR needs to let him approve the scheme, let them go ahead and run the scheme, and just let it happen. Let them run the scheme. It's probably not going to go through the whole season anyways, because the mean point is very, very shady. Apparently, they gave him $10 million to Brandon Brown. I'm not sure if the checks are going to clear. I don't think the sponsorship, if it does get approved, is going to go through the full season, and we're probably going to be back to square one anyways. We could have not just talked about the situation, just let him run the scheme. I don't know why they had to make this bigger deal than it was. And sometimes NASCAR just needs to just let things happen and not get involved in very, very serious situations. Because in my opinion, they've made it more crazier than it needs to be. In my personal opinion, it's a bigger story than it really should have been, in my opinion. So, anyway, that is your today's NASCAR and Motorsports story. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and notifications to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on my page as well. Let's get over that and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about the LGB sponsorship situation, and do you believe that NASCAR should allow the sponsorship to go through? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about NASCAR looking to ban political sponsors here in 2022? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the Chili Bowl entry list. There's a lot of major entries that are coming into Chili Bowl, and I will have a major video talking about this here tomorrow on the channel. Check it out here on the channel tomorrow. But anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.